both in the case of those sorts of things, the anchors, and in other fittings, he would design with an intensive effort just what he thought should be used. Now, an interesting thing from a mechanical standpoint, that if you have cleats like these lined up with all different sizes, the foreground one's big and the background one's very small. That's not just the photography, they really are going from big to small. The interesting thing is that you cannot mechanically take one of the small ones and just blow up the proportions geometrically similar, because if you did, the big cleat would be too skinny and weak and probably break. So what he did was he designed, I guess, a sort of a middle-sized one, and the drawing doesn't have any dimensions, but it has letters, A, B, C, D, and E, dimensions for everything. And then he prepared a schedule with the A, B, C, D columns with the dimensions of the appropriate parts of all of these cleats. And this was done after an intensive effort of design, prototyping, experimenting, including destructive testing. And once he'd done that, fairly early in his career, he never had to touch cleats again. And they made all the cleats there in the foundry and finished them up. And the same was true of many other things, like chocks. These are the design of the chocks. Now you notice if you go on a lot of boats, the chocks in the bow, well, some boats today don't even have them, but when they do have them, they often have a lot of sharp corners. And they might, in some cases, round them for the case of the line just going through here, but they might have this back sharp, or they might have that corner sharp, so that when people run a line through them, particularly back on itself, the sharp point will cut through it. But these cleats are rounded in every way, and you see they're built right into the stem of the boat. There's a rivet through here, and they're really beefy with big fastenings down, so that that again was a case where he designed a great many of them, made tables of the dimensions, and once he solved that problem, he could forget about it and go on to the next thing. Might be pad eyes. Same thing. He worked those out. In the case of the anchors, he made prototype anchors, and he took them over to the beach at Papa Squash and towed them with mules to break them and to test the holding power. Same with oarlocks. And many visitors who come here are quite surprised and amazed that the Herreshoffs themselves designed and constructed all the steam machinery. This is a element we're lucky to have gotten from a New Zealand man, and it's part of a boiler that the company had made many years ago. And we have quite a number of steam engines. We have one that powered Mr. J.P. Morgan's yacht Navette in his commute from Glen Cove, New York to Wall Street. And we have some others, including one that powered the machinery. This is the Navette engine. It's a triple expansion. And there are many innovations in this. There are innovations of crowding the cylinders together to make the crankshaft short. There are innovations of substituting heavy cast frames with instead rods of steel that make it all rigid with lightweight, and good methods of lubrication and flywheels and all. There's a great story, maybe you know about synthetic vibration. If you have some element on a car or a boat, at certain speeds it'll vibrate like anything, make a racket. Well, when he'd made the engines for one of the naval torpedo boats, there was a lot of vibration. And so Captain Nat said he would fix it by attaching a weight to the middle of the vibrating element of the engine. And the story we heard was that one of these burly old chief boatswain's mate came into the lunchroom here and bellowed out to his associates. He said, "You got to hear what that crazy man's going to do. That he's going to fix this vibrating engine by fastening a little piece of steel to the connecting rod." Well, of course, he did that, and it changed the natural frequency of the element and didn't vibrate anymore, and the chief machinist had to eat his words. This winter, my nephew and I visited the Naval Air Museum, which is in Pensacola, Florida. If you ever get near Pensacola, go to that museum. I'd say it's the best run museum in America. Maybe even discounting our own museum. But it has in it well over 50 aircraft, many of them vintage. It also is the home port of the naval aces. And in it is the first airplane that ever flew across the Atlantic Ocean, which is called the NC-4. And the curious thing is, when these planes were being built under the aegis of Professor Jerome Hunsaker of MIT, he went around to the various boat yards to get the hulls made. So this some 27-foot hull of the NC-4 was built here at the Herreshoff Company. And it's in great condition today, a double plank, lightly built, and it looks just great. And this airplane, which has a wingspan the same as a Boeing 737 today, is there with its engines and 4 propellers, and the whole thing looks like perfect. So it was a great thrill for me to see that. Well, here's a picture of some of the great workmen that I've referred to. And I don't know if you've noticed in the front hall, we have a set of the regulations under which they work, and they're pretty strict. It even says that if the workmen are slovenly in their duties or have frequent use of vile language, that may be sufficient reasons for dismissal. But according to one of my uncles who wrote about this, they became a little more forgiving in the later years. And so the men did have some tricks. And one of them was that when they had a new employee, they would put a big piece of wood over the doorway of passage from one part of the shop to another, and they loaded it up with sawdust and shavings. And then they had a bunch of strings that went from there to another point. And the idea was when this unsuspecting guy would walk through, they'd pull the string and they'd dump all these shavings all over him. Well, the other thing went wrong was one day they had this all set up, ready to trick a guy, and right behind him came Captain Nat. So they quickly sounded the alarm and they said, "Don't pull the cord." But the alarm didn't get out, and they dumped the shavings all over the man that was walking right in front of Captain Nat. Well, this is revealing about his character. What do you think he did? He did nothing. He just looked up and saw what had happened, and he went through another door and went on his business. Probably the best way to discipline them not to do it again. And I think that's the way he was. This is a picture of some of my favorite people when I was young. It's Captain Irving Johnson and his wonderful wife, Exie. And many of you may know what they did. They sailed around the world 5 or 6 times on the schooner Yankee. I nearly went with them after I'd started college, and I wonder what would have happened to me if I'd done that. It was a 1.5-year trip, and I thought of leaving college and going with them and then going back to college, which might have been okay, but I didn't do it finally. I was too responsible. But Irving Johnson started here as captain of a New York 40, and he used to wrestle one of my uncles, Uncle Nat, in the YMCA here. And he was a great physical culturist, and he climbed the electric light poles and stood on his head at the top. And he told a story that relates to the workmen of the company. One of the most famous workmen was a man named Charlie Peterson, low stature, perfectionist. He ran the rigging loft, and for a great many years he pulled wire through wire splicers with his little finger, to the point where he got so he could chin himself with one little finger, if you can imagine that. So one burly yacht captain came into the rigging loft when Captain Johnson was there, and this guy said, "What's this nonsense I hear about a guy that can chin himself?" So Charlie reached up to the bar and pulled himself up with his little finger. And the guy said, "Well, that's nothing." He said, "You're just a little skinny guy, and that's why you can do that." And Charlie didn't say anything. He picked up a 5-pound lead weight and put it in his pocket. Picked up another 5-pound lead weight, put it in his pocket, and he chinned himself again. So they did have characters, and the characters were admirable people. That's a picture of a lot of the employees that we had in one of the early reunions here at the museum. This museum now is, this year, 43 years old, and when we started, there were quite a few retired great workmen of the company still here, and I'm so honored with the memory that we were able to honor them. During World War II, they built 100 vessels for the military, including this Navy torpedo boat, and we've founded and had here the America's Cup Hall of Fame, and this commemorates the fact they built all the great Cup defenders here. This is the Reliance launching in 1903, and we have a great painting of how she first sailed here. This is the way it looked on the deck of the Reliance, and this model that Sandy's building will have on its deck the crew, which happened by rather good luck to be the same scale as G.I. Joe. So Hasbro's given us 70 G.I. Joes. We're looking for somebody, maybe a lady, that would sew 70 uniforms for the G.I. Joes to be on the rail of the Reliance model. And as you may know or may not know, the Rhode Island Quarter has on it the Reliance. And that was a result of a contest in Rhode Island between Roger Williams, the founder of Rhode Island, Gilbert Stuart, the great portrait painter of George Washington, and the Reliance. And the Reliance won. And we helped the U.S. Mint to prepare the design. And the only thing that went wrong was the governor of Rhode Island, who then was a senator, John Chafee, insisted on having the Newport Bridge in this. Well, I immediately realized there's no way the Reliance, with its very tall rig, could sail under the bridge. But fortunately, I decided never to tell the Mint because I didn't want them to substitute another boat. So there are millions of quarters around the world of this great yacht sailing toward a bridge under which it could not pass. Well, there's been great photographers all the time on the scene, and there's also, I'll only show part of this to save time, but I want to show you a very interesting film. Movies, as you may know, were invented by Thomas Edison in the late 1890s. And in 1899 and 1901, he exercised the new invention of movies by taking pictures of America's Cup races. So this is something I never expected to see, but we got these films from the Library of Congress, and they show the jockeying of the two yachts before a race started. Well, my friend Dennis Conner told me that he invented match race starting tactics, and I haven't gotten around to showing him this film, which predates Dennis's tactics by about 75 years, and I think it's worth a trip to San Diego to show this to Dennis. I think I must do that. This was dubbed by Captain Nat the Noble Trio. It's in the center of the Reliance, and on the sides the Constitution and the Columbia, boats that were built over a 4-year span from 1899 to 1903. And this is a picture of the Great Reliance being pressed in a strong breeze. And look at that stern wave. She's certainly exceeding her normally to be expected speed-length ratio.